without further ado.
Well, thanks, Stephen. I'll hand one more over to Michelle to kick us off.
Okay, all right. All right, so thanks so much for coming tonight. And this is a very multidisciplinary and multi-role panel, which has been very exciting for me to participate in as somebody who does work primarily with faculty and with bringing in educational technologies. But through some of the work that I've been able to do, Michael and I have been talking for months now about some of these issues, and it kind of got me thinking as a faculty member about how far we've come with instructional video of all kinds. And it dredged up out of a lot of old history. When was the first time that I began to use educational video, or really started thinking about how this could work into different kind of media for learning and different kind of learning activities? And yeah, and that's oh my, and yeah, this memory is one of those traumatic ones. I spent the better part of the summer, I would say the worst part of the summer actually, on putting together a project for, I will not name who I worked with on this. It was very cutting edge at the time, I promise. What we were doing is we were making PowerPoints because we were cutting edge. And my job was to come up with ancillary materials to be packaged with the textbook, and they were going to have video. This was going to be so cool. So I got shipped these boxes of VHS tapes, and I was told, these have all these wonderful clips on them that are so relevant to the concepts in this introduction to psychology course. And we want you to kind of find those, and you can actually embed them in the PowerPoint video. It's a PowerPoint slide, it'll be great. And then I sat down to watch them. And what they consisted of, I mean, this was all somebody's good intentions. They were mostly taped off of news programs, things that had to do with the mind. There was one of like, local mom has psychic flash of, what's going to happen to her child, and it's going, oh wow, this contradicts everything we are trying to teach them. So, yeah, it's video, but I felt like I could only salvage about 3 or 4 clips out of the whole thing. So that was a rough start. But now in a lot of the teaching that I do is I'm putting together online blended courses in particular. I've worked with my local e-learning center to put together 3 and 4 minute narrated videos on divisions of memory for a memory course. If you're familiar with VoiceThread, that's kind of in the same vein. You can make slideshows that this time are interactive, and the students are actually doing something as they go through them. So, now this has become a pretty cherished part of my own practice. And in particular, there's a project that's still going on right now. We just put together a chapter in this free ebook if you want to take a look at this project in more depth. The Attention Matters project. So this project really does hinge, as I'll show you in a few different ways, it does hinge on the use of video to show students, not just tell them, some particular concepts that have to do with distraction and the educational implications of texting your 5 friends while you were in your OChem class and trying to do that, which is a really hot issue with faculty. When I see faculty get pretty exercised about something, this is a big issue. And there were, for example, dueling op-eds all last year, a real spate of, well, ban laptops, don't ban laptops, what about access, what about cell phones? And we wanted to put something together that was really a solution that would speak to students more directly about metacognition and being able to make their own decisions. So this is something that functions essentially as a MOOC. That's institution specific. So students can check in, they can finish it in an hour or 2, and they get extra credit from many of our wonderful faculty members who are just really happy that they can bring something in that doesn't have to eat up a whole lot of their time, or they don't have to give over a class period. So, with Attention Matters, I'll show you an overview kind of at the end of this segment, give you a little bit more of a sense of where videos fit in. But we do have students watching videos. In this case, since we had no resources to develop this, these are freely available videos from the web. We kind of scrounged in the way many faculty do. If we had the option, we would have something a little bit more purpose-built or something like that. But What these do is they demonstrate some pretty surprising effects and some consequences that can happen when we're not paying attention. Now the videos themselves don't just stand alone. We don't just say, well, watch this and you're done. They are a way to kick off discussion and get students asking themselves, what is going to be the role of technology in my life? How am I going to be sure I'm not distracted during, the most important things I'm trying to do, and so on. And, we did just share recently in this article and a few others we have come under review right now, that we do see at least some short-term impacts on students' attitudes and what we have come to diplomatically term counterproductive beliefs about attention. They might be right, they might be wrong, but if you believe these, you're probably going to be that person who's texting 5 friends. Okay. So I showed you a sample of some of these counterproductive beliefs, and we have a way of surveying students either before or after they take the Attention Matters module. And we do find across the board, there's different types of these beliefs. Some have to do with memory, some with attention. But we find that these decrease as a function of this short-term module. Where we find longer-term impacts over, say, a couple semesters on GPA, I don't know. That we haven't. We need to come back and visit that. And that's kind of finding a needle in a haystack as far as impacts go. But this has been, our experience with this kind of video. So the second thing that I wanted to kind of bring to this discussion as food for thought and perhaps a framework is, what I can bring as a cognitive psychologist, which is the cognitive perspective on what goes on during learning generally, what goes on during learning with multimedia, and then what might be particularly relevant with video. So I'll put together, I'll share with you a couple of kind of basic points about, from a cognitive psychologist perspective, what's going on when a student, say, sits down with a video that is intended to change their attitudes or show them how to engage in a process or give them a conceptual understanding of a content area, what could be happening. So the first thing is really attention, right? So that's obviously a topic that's close to my heart. But there's a pretty long-standing idea in cognitive psychology that very little gets retained. Not a whole lot happens cognitively unless you have attention first. So as far as learning with osmosis, learning in the background, putting on the video and doing something else and getting something out of it, that's not likely to happen. So now videos, as we'll probably talk about at a few other points during the session, is special in that a lot can be going on in one video. So like looking at, say, a page of text. So with video, we want to be thinking about, in this video, is it clear where students are supposed to be directing their attention? If there's several different things going on, are there cues to that? We're pretty good at following cues. We do that socially when we pay attention to something together, so we do that a lot. But without this, students are going to get something very different or nothing at all out of that video. And then there's what I'll kind of use as a generic term, processing input, kind of breaking down what am I looking at, interpreting the speech I might be hearing, reading text if that happens to be there. So that's a stage that probably is not going to take a whole lot of capacity. We don't spend a whole lot of time on this stage, but that's one other thing that has to happen. So I have to break that down. Then things get interesting because working memory will come into play. That's a concept that we've talked about quite a bit in our discussions. And what about working memory? And working memory is one of those concepts that we're still figuring out what this is in the field and how it works. But we do know a fair amount about it. And it may be different than many people's kind of casual or intuitive understanding of what it is. So working memory is a capacity that allows us to hang on to information that we are working with in the here and now. But here's the caveat. It's used when those pieces of information aren't something we can interpret and just store more in long-term memory. So, for example, when you're listening to a speaker at a talk, you don't have to take every single word and just shove it into working memory, which is good because it doesn't hold very much. Once you can interpret it, you extract the meaning. Working memory is not really taxed. But if I'm, say, juggling the instructions for a task I'm supposed to do, I'm remembering another piece of information, and I've got some facts, but I don't know how they relate to each other, that can tax working memory. And once you overwhelm working memory, not a whole lot is going to be retained. So that's something to think about as well in a complex piece of media such as a video. And lastly, building long-term representation. So like a lot of memory folks, I don't think of long-term memory as just sort of a big bucket where you can place things. There's some complexities to it. What you're essentially doing when you store something long-term is building a new representation. A good metaphor for long-term memories is kind of like a network, right? We don't just put things in there in a big file. We like to hook it to what we already know. So as we interpret, we relate that to what we already know, and ideally, we end up with something that makes sense and is going to be firmly kind of entrenched along with the knowledge we already know. So I think a lot of us, if you teach or work with learners in any capacity, you know that there's this kind of snowball or rich get richer effect. Once you know a lot, you can learn a lot more in an area. But if you're missing crucial pieces of information, this process becomes very difficult to do. And I won't spend too much time on this, but it is true that a long-term memory representation doesn't do you a lot of good unless you can get it back later. We know from a vast amount of research at this point that what really strengthens our ability to remember something over time is remembering it over time. So every time we retrieve or ask ourselves a question or take a quiz on something, that really, really strengthens that memory and our ability to get it back. And especially when we're talking about skills too. We're talking about, oh, I'm learning how to do something, right? An APA style paper, for example. Practice with feedback is absolutely key. I think we all know that, but it's very easy for that to kind of get lost in the shuffle of content with students. So another area that is really, really important conceptually when thinking about any kind of educational media is multimedia theory. So how many people have heard of this or have passing familiarity with multimedia theory? Richard Mayer's work. So I would absolutely say that if you're interested in this, Mayer's research group not only they're incredibly prolific at putting out research that really specifically isolates and targets and tests different aspects of media. You know, is it better if you do it this way or is it better if you do it that way? They're not only that great with that, they are wonderful about kind of boiling down their points and their findings for the rest of us so that you can actually see how to apply these things. So there's a couple of different books they put out for non-specialists in the field like myself, and it's really a treasure trove of what to look for or do or not do in this kind of media. So, for example, one of their big findings is the multimedia principle, which is it's not too hard to wrap your head around. It's just that when we put together something like an audio narration with a visual, that tends to produce better understanding and better learning than either one alone. So our brains are actually really very good at integrating across different inputs, across vision and across audio. And that's a very natural thing for most of us to do. And so good educational multimedia takes advantage of this. Now, that said, they also point out that reading at the same time as listening to speech, as we always do with PowerPoints, creates a competition effect because just text is visual, but it activates more auditory processing mechanisms. So yeah, it does that. They've also come up with the segmentation principle, pointing out that how we chunk out information during in educational media is also really, really important. So sometimes instead of a continuous stream of information and demonstration, it's really helpful to have stop out points, either where the learner can just take a break or where they can get some feedback or answer a question. So we're just figuring out now in the field exactly how all these theoretical principles play out when it comes to video specifically. So this is a work in progress, and stay tuned. But so far we are finding a few specific things. So for example, segmentation, that principle also really applies to video. For one thing, it helps learners avoid what's called essential overload. So you can imagine if you've ever watched an instructional video on your own and they get to that point where you just don't understand the concepts anymore, you haven't yet formed those long-term representations, if that information starts coming, you get very, very lost. Now, this doesn't mean that students should just completely control the progression of the material, because as novices, they may not know where to put the segments. So they're kind of finding there's this good balance between, okay, maybe when we design educational multimedia, we figure out, okay, here's a good stopping point, but the student or the user says, here's how much time I need. So a balance of control and interactivity is turning out to be an intriguing idea with this. And even things like the perspectives. So shooting video from multiple perspectives, that's an issue that never applied in things like PowerPoint slide presentations that Mayer's group was originally looking at. But that matters as well. So there's even some hints that videos that have multiple perspectives incorporated into them can produce possibly richer representations. We have to work harder as we process them. We may personalize them more as we look at them. So there's even some interesting and intriguing applications like this. So bringing it back practically though, because I'm not just a cognitive psychologist, I really am. I'm a teacher and I work with people on how to actually get this stuff to work in practical situations. So yeah, everybody got that? Great. This is what happened when I sat there. I was like, let me map out in this 1 hour Attention Matters module what we're doing. And you know, the point here isn't like, oh, for you to see every single little piece of this. It's where the videos were anchored in just how they were embedded in this overall learning experience. So this icon here is what I use for, here's where students are actually watching one of these short videos. And when you look at the whole thing, you go, wow, that's only like 3 little points in a whole lot of other stuff. But that is part of the point, is that it's not that students needed to watch video for an hour. What they needed to do is have a very well-selected video that was framed, where we told them what we wanted them to get out of it, and then they returned and discussed it, and they took a self-assessment about it, and then they progressed to something that made sense in the sequence. So I've come to believe that, you know, for me, that's how video can really look when it is used effectively. Yes, there are design principles that matter, but of course, it always comes down to the how. What role is this going to play? How does this provide value in a bigger learning experience? It's going to be interactive, and it's going to be very faculty-driven. So thank you so much for that, and for giving me some free time to talk about some of these concepts, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks very much, Michelle. So the stuff I'm going to talk about will kind of connect quite nicely with Michelle's work. And we found we had that simpatico about the multimedia theory and some of the design principles when we first got talking. The work that I'm going to talk about is based on a lot of original research we've been doing this year. Much of it's consolidated in this white paper. I've printed out a bunch of copies, which comprised a full literature review and then some new experimental studies. We have got the full article list that comprised the literature review, so if anyone's interested in that and they hand me their cards or the experimental data, very happy to supply that to anyone if you like. So why this white paper? Why did we do it? So I think, as we've said, you know, the last 10, 15 years has seen transformational change in the higher education market. Google is 18 years old. YouTube was incorporated in 2005. And we've seen a sort of proliferation of open educational digital resources, speaking to your point about stuff just becoming freely available.
Or it's not freely available.
Or not freely, yeah. It's just there's a lot there.
You just have to find how to pay
for it. Yeah. And I think it's sort of presented a lot of challenges for instructional designers and educators, because you see so much out there that actually, you know, how do you make sense of it, and what is actually useful, or how, you know, what's going to actually have the right kind of impact. But I think what's happened in response to this sort of wild west of sort of lots of content just becoming immediately available is that there's been a lot of innovative thinking around pedagogical delivery and course delivery. So blended learning, I think the methodology of blended learning, which video contributes to a lot, sort of came out of that process. And I think there's some research studies that we've cited that says that, you know, unregulated open educational video is actually bad for course structure and bad for student performance. And so actually it places strain and pressure on the institution to get that back. And blended learning provides that availability. We've seen, of course, the rise of the flipped classroom. This is Mboilu et al.'s meta-analysis. It's referenced in the white paper. There were barely any studies around the efficacy of the flipped classroom up until 2015, and then 2015, boom, sort of like 194 articles that we found. And clearly that's a model that, as probably everyone knows in this room, lends itself perfectly to video, or video lends itself perfectly to that. And then MOOCs have, your MOOC, which is fabulous, the Attention Matters one. We've seen this incredible development of MOOCs in the last 10 years. There was, I think, between years 2012 and 2013, they literally doubled in size in the US market. And this is Gartner's hype cycle here, which people may know about. Gartner, a technology company, and I think, I don't know if people can remember, but I think there was a Chronicle of Higher Education thing that said at one point, this is the end of the university. You know, there was talk literally of MOOCs sort of destroying the university structure. And of course that didn't happen. And I think now, I mean, clearly we've sort of gone through the up and down of the hype, and we're in this plateau of productivity. MOOCs have got pluses and minuses, I think, in the institutional framework, but one thing they've definitely done is spawned lots of innovation in thinking about sort of digital technology and educational delivery. So I think they definitely sort of, you know, they have pluses perhaps more than minuses, but they've created their own sort of tensions. And at the Sage, I mean, we published 10 video collections now. We plan to publish many more. We've been publishing for 50 plus years in social and behavioral sciences and STEM subjects more recently. And we're a creator and a curator of video content. And so for us, I think the white paper it's really a way for us to try and find out, speaking to questions like what is making a difference, what's going to have that impact on learning. As we've been looking at very closely with a lot of our other publishing, we really want to know that and to be able to sort of add to the knowledge base that's out there. And so, you know, we're going to keep doing this. This white paper is at the end of this process, but it's been really fascinating to go through. So within all this educational, higher educational change, we've seen huge amounts that's happened. This concept of disruptive pedagogy, if that's a term that's familiar to people, this sort of idea that with online resources and video or other multimedia, there's the availability to actually change the mindset of delivering education. So going from didactic approaches and teacher-centered approaches to flipping it around to more student-centered approaches, constructivist ideas around teaching, putting more power around learning into the hands of students, which students feel very motivated by, actually, in studies and reports. So there's been a big sort of development of lots of change in disruptive pedagogy. We've seen obviously growth in digital literacy, both with students and with educators. And new modes of teaching have emerged, problem-based learning, which is another mechanism of teaching which video adds huge value to, which is really about teaching instead of in this structure of here's some concepts, here's some theories. It's about presenting students with real-world problems and working backwards and sort of getting students to work back from that to try and find the solutions to those problems. And video is a very, very effective mechanism for actually delivering that. And then, of course, the rise of the video in the classroom. You just see the studies just showing again and again, video in the classroom rates sort of going up. And so each of these sort of fit and connect with each other. We're seeing this general trend over the last decade more towards more sort of innovative pedagogy, changes in sort of approaches to teaching and learning, new theories about delivery, sort of the impact of multimedia learning, and I think some sense that there is some efficacy here. You know, that's actually making a difference in changing beliefs and attitudes, and the approaches to teaching change will make a difference in the classroom. So what about our own research? So bringing it sort of within Sage in terms of what we found. We've done some focus groups, we've done some surveys, we've done some literature reviewing and experiments. There's got a lot that we could share more, and I don't have time to do that, but I'd be happy to share with others if you'd be very interested to see. what are kind of faculty and student preferences, just as a snapshot around the use of video? Well, this is a survey that we did with faculty members, and then we've got some student data to come on top of that. What we're seeing is, and this may not be a whole surprise, that faculty really want to illustrate a point in the classroom. Perhaps this problem-based learning approach fits with that. They want to see things brought to life, linking theory to practice, and they want to stimulate class discussion. So you're seeing that's where faculty members are really seeing when they want to kind of incorporate video. And actually, when we talked to students in our Washington, DC office earlier this year, and we had a focus group, they were saying the same things independently of this, largely speaking. They want concept videos. They want things that will just help them make sense of the theories and the concepts they're learning, but not just reiterations of that, but things that bring that to life. Case study videos, skills development, content, things to support that, and again, news story videos, things that should bring things to life and make things make sense, and that meaningful thing that you were talking about, Michelle, that allows the learning to sort of really embed in your longer term memory. And then I did some analysis on what actually was seen through the research we did with the white paper and what the students were telling us in this focus group, and there's some really interesting overlapping trends actually. So the students were telling us, and the research data was saying, video is it's received positively. Students are more motivated to engage with their courses where video is included. There are studies that show that actually students are more likely to revise for exams the week before an exam or the night before an exam if they watch video related to that, if they feel like that's going to help them get the performance, more likely to engage with other course materials where video is actually in use in the class. So sort of the generally sort of positive feelings about video if it's used in there are the principles that I'll do a little bit more on that Michelle has highlighted. So students are telling us as well, look, video needs to be designed properly. You can't just throw video at us. We need it sort of to make sense. It needs to be guided towards learning. And that is critical to viewing and engagement levels. Shorter videos, preferred, but actually you can have longer videos, and the segmentation principle that Michelle's talking about from Mayer's work is there. So as long as students have got control over their learning, most platforms, our own included, have the capability to slow down, rewind, sort of go back, find the content that you need, putting the pace of learning into the hands of students, then you can have longer videos. It's just when you just throw things at students, their attention spans are obviously not able to absorb for so long. And actually, this was an interesting thing that we found as well. So actually, students like seeing instructors on film. There have been, you hear about this concept of a talking head sometimes, but actually, when you've got instructors there, perhaps breaking down the barrier between themselves and the student, where you can sort of feel like they're in their own private seminar tutorial with an expert, where they are themselves directing to an object of learning on screen, receive some very good, powerful results on engagement. So it's all about cues, as Michelle was saying, the right sorts of cues. And then to continue, we see video is more engaged when directed to learning outcomes, so having those explicit, making sure they're there in video or associated with the video, or the instructor is using the video in relation to learning outcomes. That seems to be really important. I've talked a bit about the control, personalised learning, which is sort of becoming a bigger thing. I think putting students in control of this. So streaming video and technologies or platforms just allow that a lot more now. And I think actually that sort of self-regulation, self-direction approach to learning with video, that seems to be where students prefer to engage with it. Visuals, we'll talk a bit about graphics in a second. Visuals should be clear, but they're not actually essential to learning. So, just furnishing videos with lots of visuals and images isn't the answer. It's not the way to do it. In fact, it can be counterproductive. So things need to be intentionally designed. Things need to be there. You need to be guiding people towards the right sort of learning objects. And graphics can, of course, be very useful, but we'll talk about in ways in which they are in a second. And then there's this theory, the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, which we found, and Michelle has talked some about as well, and that is, it is being shown to help learning. There are tons of studies now with this, and they all have great results that replicate again and again. Mayer's lab is phenomenal. I mean, it's really, honestly, the replication rates for some of his studies are just off the chart. And this sort of idea that video can stimulate the dual processes in the brain, and that can have really good effect on learning. And this bit about integrating from working to longer term memory, as Michelle was saying, video can play a hand in that if used in the right way. So, but it has to be remembered that it can involve a lot of cognitive load as well, which brings me on to my next thing. Critical thinking and development of critical thinking. We asked the question in our white paper about that, what role does that have in the development of critical thinking? And actually, it was almost like there's almost a dearth of published stuff around that. There's a real knowledge gap in how video in itself is having a role in that. And what we've sort of found is that there could be some methodological restrictions about that. Most studies around this seem to be focused around sort of short-term experimental online studies, testing, learning, retrieval-based learning after you've just watched the video. But it's quite complicated, it seems, and Michelle, you might be able to say more about this, that to actually test deeper level of knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge and the development of knowledge in a longer and deeper way. So I think it's hard. I think at the moment people have found that quite difficult to test and research on, but I see that what's happened with the flipped classroom stuff, I see this flipping, to use the term, with critical thinking. I think people will figure this out and there'll be a lot of research. Actually, I think at Sage we would really love to get involved in helping some of that research too. But I think there's an interesting other phenomenon with critical thinking that I want to play out with you now, and I want to have a volunteer who might help me. Who in this audience has not heard of Richard Wiseman's colour-changing card trick? Okay, I think many of you haven't. Who is brave? Who is brave enough to play with me? Are you brave enough? Okay. What's your name? Lisa. Okay, Lisa. Okay. All right. Well, I'd really like you to. I'd like to watch the short video. Right. This guy's a magician, and he's going to do a card trick. Right. And what I want you to do is I want you to watch this, and I want you to see if you can see how he does it. All right. So.
No spoilers.
So watch this. No, watch this video.
Hi, I'm Richard, this is Sarah, and we're going to perform the amazing colour-changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, an excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table. Give a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing colour-changing card trick.
Okay. Now let me just ask you a slightly different question. How many changes did you spot in that video?
They changed clothes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah?
And was she the same person?
Did
Did they change people? I don't know, when she changed clothes, I wasn't sure if that was the same person that came back again or not.
Well, let's see. Let's see. So this is the video again.
Hi, I'm Richard, this is Sarah, and we're going to perform the amazing colour-changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table. Do a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing colour changing card trick.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much. Actually, you did pretty well. You did better than most of my team when I did this in Toronto last summer.
I
But
got none.
what this, I think there's a lot of potential for video in critical thinking development, like with all pedagogy with materials. It's how the instructor uses it, incorporates it into the design of their class. This video introduces this concept called change blindness, which Michelle has actually in her Attention Matters module 2. And basically, we approach video viewing with intentionality, and sometimes we don't see things.
Why is there a gorilla in the background?
Well, yeah. For not seeing the gorilla because that didn't actually, that's another thing. I think the thing with video is it's very highly stimulating, right? As we talk about it, it does put a lot of load cognitively on us, and so I think that's for instructional designers. That's just something to bear in mind. I think it can have great benefits because of that, but also clearly, like all content, the instructor needs to really think carefully about how this has been incorporated into their design. Okay, so Michelle's talked a bit about the principles of multimedia learning, so I won't go back over them in great detail. But as Michelle was saying, there are many books out there that have been published by him and others. Clark and Mayer's E-Learning and the Science of Instruction is a really good one. It's a Bible, actually, I think, for actually in our production at Sage just got this and they've been poring over it, and I've read it, and it's really a fantastic framework for thinking about how to design video. So we at Sage have been really looking at that very closely as we go into developing more video collections. So the multimedia principle, there are actually 12 principles overall, something like that, give or take. And these are sort of the main 6. But basically, the multimedia principle is, as Michelle said earlier, we've got this thing called the coherence principle, which probably should be fed. Too much noise, buzz, flashiness is just distracting. We should avoid that in our design. The contiguity principle is about proximity. So anything you want to be directing, cueing people towards learning, you should be making sure that things aren't too spaced apart. Things should be within that sort of attention zone for effective learning. Sort of audio. I think it's hard to just expect people to read text on screen. It's better to have audio in conjunction with text on screen. That's the modality principle. The signaling principle, I've got one of our Sage videos to sort of illustrate this.
Your attention is drawn to it. So in fact, let me show you a few examples of this. Here's the first one. Okay, so what I hope you felt from that is, first of all, you spotted that thing almost immediately with very little effort. In fact, it probably felt automatic. It probably felt like you were just drawn to that object.
So Stephen Jordan's in our site collection a video on attention, actually, sort of talking about, actually pointing students towards the object that they need to be engaging with. So this idea of signalling is really, really important. And then there's this personalization principle. So taking the formality out of content and video content is really important for breaking down barriers and getting that trust component. This is one of our conversation videos between an academic and a practitioner in our education collection. And trying to show that theory and practice connection, and that conversation approach, that conversational approach it's been seen to be sort of very, very effective. Okay, so before I finish, over time, I want to kind of quickly run through the graphics study that we did. So we were very interested, I think, at the top to learn about what happened with images. Like before we learned all of this, we just said, well, we produce a lot of images, and we have a design team, we work with a production team, and we wanted to sort of see whether it works and what works. And so we designed an experiment, an online experiment with the laboratory, the psychology laboratory at Purdue University, Jeffrey Carmichael, who's an expert in retrieval-based learning. And he helped us design a study where we essentially compared, we had two tutorial videos and we did a comparison of one with graphics and then one without. So we stripped the graphics out and we sort of did a study so it was a 2x2 design, as they call it, where the students were randomly selected and then some watched one condition of one video and then they watched the other condition of the other video. And then what they did is they asked a set of subject rating questions which looked at sort of the emotional response, how they felt about the video, whether they felt they would learn something in relation to a test, what their judgment is of the presentation style and the interest, whether they'd be interested in it. And then after that, we then did a memory test. So we actually designed some learning object-based questions, and then they went and did a test after that to sort of judge that. And we initially found some interesting results. So on the screen you see the data. On the left, so the white charts are sort of without graphics in both conditions, and the blue bars are with graphics in both conditions, and this sort of summarizes the ratings questions, and this summarizes the memory performance. And so, there was sort of a slight positive effect. There was a little bit of an effect, consistent results across both videos, but it wasn't really statistically significant. But we were thinking, oh wait, there's something that chimes with what May is saying here. There could be something in this. So, okay, but look at it again. So this time, what we did was we thought it'd be quite interesting to actually look at specific kinds of graphics. Is there anything about the type of graphic, is there something about a more animated graphic that makes a difference, or a flat graphic? And so what we did is we did a similar design with a male and female speaker. These were psychology videos with an intro psych class online experiment. I'll briefly sort of play you a slight snippet.
Diffusion of responsibility.
This is a
In other
video
words,
about
if I'm the only
bystander
person
effect.
who witnesses an emergency event, I'm going to be much more likely to go in and help because it's only me. However, if there's 5 or 4 or 37 other people around, I'm going to be less likely to dial a phone number to call an emergency services.
And then this is the same clip with flat graphics.
In other words, if I'm the only person who witnesses an emergency event, I'm going to be much more likely to go in and help because it's only me. However, if there's 5 or 4 or 37 other people around,
and then this to finish off, this is with something
in other
more
words,
animated.
if I'm the only
that we
person
produced as
who
well.
witnesses an emergency event, I'm going to be much more likely to go in and help because it's only me. However, if there's 5 or 4 or 37 other people.
So, and so this time round, actually we didn't get any replication of the marginal effect from previous study, and the ratings didn't vary across the conditions, but there were some very interesting takeaways from this. I think, although we could see that viewing graphics did not improve memory, and sort of when we looked at the data from our focus groups, and then we read the research from the literature review, it became clear that it's not about the graphics in itself that's going to drive learning. In many respects, if we were doing this study again, we would have done all the literature review stuff first and then some experimental stuff after, learning from that. But I think it actually correlates with what we're seeing, that generally speaking, you have to design with intentionality. And that goes for, I don't know if that goes for everything. If you're creating a video for educational and pedagogical purpose, make sure you've got the design with intentionality. And graphics plays into that, so does audio, and so does other things that get wrapped around that. But that is the fundamental thing, not the visual in itself. So that's me finished. Thank you very much. If you'd like a white paper, please have one. But I think I'll hand back to you, Ostina. We'll open it up to people with questions.
Yeah, thank you, Michael and Michelle. We appreciate your presentations. Does anybody have any questions offhand? I have some questions I prepared ahead of time, but I want to give you all a chance if anybody wants to clarify or some follow-up questions on some what they saw there and heard.
Yes.
What role do documentaries, a lot of documentaries are used in classes? I mean, where in all the learning stuff? Is it illustrative of concepts? Is that where documentaries kind of fall?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, no, if there's a literature on learning from documentaries, I have no idea. So,
It seems like a lot of documentaries are used in class.
okay, so full length, right, and so that's a real difference. I mean, assigning
Yeah.
students a professionally produced feature-length documentary to watch at home.
Right, which are not specifically educational video.
it might possibly fit with some of this that we learned about sort of trying to help students make sense of concepts and the sort of trying to see things in the real world. I think that's where it can have great power. And the storytelling of documentary filmmakers, we do license selectively really powerfully well-made documentary films and stage video, and we try to do that so that it's in alignment with the rest of the content we're making. I think it's because of its storytelling that's really effective. I think it does bring things effectively to life, actually. So I think that's, without any research evidence, yeah.
You know, we know there's again a real theme from cognitive science and from memory that something is very privileged in the human mind about storytelling. Even when you piece together pretty arbitrary information, if you can make it into a little story, there's something about that clicks with us and allows us to retrieve it later as well. That said, I mean, these are films that are created for artistic purposes as well, and to move people, sometimes to advance an agenda. None of which are bad things, but you know, I know in psychology for a long time teachers have said, okay, can I assign a feature film and have this be a part of, say, my memory unit? Assigning the film Memento I mean, that will, and if you haven't seen it, it's an older film and it's a very dark thriller about having amnesia, and does he actually have amnesia? There's great concepts in that film, and boy does that spice up a topic on brain lesions and short-term and long-term memory. But, I mean, I'm going to have to be really, really careful to convey, okay, this is what's fictionalized about this. And yeah, if you come away from it and be like, wow, I don't think he actually killed his wife in the end. Okay, well that wasn't my purpose. It's another case, and so much is going on in a video. If I want to convey some information, it may not be the way for me to go about it, but if it is in the context of something broader, we could do that, then we could approach it differently. And then when it does come to critical thinking, how are you going to guide and scaffold that? Simply watching something like a documentary and say, well, okay, I believe what they told me. That too may not be what that faculty member had envisioned for that assignment. So let me put that back to you. What are your reactions to that, having, now that you're experiencing that as teaching through documentaries?
We just observed a lot of usage in general was around documentaries, and I was just curious where it fell in this kind of description.
So you're seeing a spike in fact assigning them and wanting to assign them, but well, what are they doing with it in the classroom? Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, we see usage, but who knows? We don't see the actual use going on.
Yes.
Context.
I think in our institution, it's really just a continuation of what they did with physical format for years and years, but it's just that now they want the accessibility, and they want to be able to embed it. And what I have heard from faculty, quite a few faculty actually, is they would put, DVDs on reserve, and the students simply are not doing anything. They're just not, any more than I am when we're doing stuff learning on the internet or whatever I'm doing. People want it to be a point of need in our learning management system. We have learning, most of our courses are learning, and the faculty definitely say that if it's in there, the students are 50 times more likely to view it than if they had assigned in the old way. So it's partly that, and I think it's partly just because as a modern society, we learn in multimedia ways. I mean, most of us don't learn simply by visual text or audio, auditory learning anymore. So students are, I don't think, any different, and documentary brings together all those different kinds of sensual modalities. And they tell a narrative that I think students can take away the concept more easily. So that's what I'm hearing from our faculty and education. Plus, they are doing a lot of the segmented learning that you're talking about, and that can be spread out more easily in a learning management system. It's hard to do that in a classroom setting because students come and go. So not every student comes to every class or has the same level of attention. So if the student's in control and can kind of go back and review it, or can I missed the class but still go in and look at it, the segmented part I think is more effective than can be. So that's
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. I mean, I'm just thinking where you were saying that we've learned quite a bit from powerful storytellers and documentarians and how we create our own original production content in Sage Video. So some of our in-practice videos that we've created, we work very closely with our producers and production team about how to get that storyboarding and storytelling component into it, so they become 10, 15-minute mini documentaries, if you like. So because I think that there's a lot we can learn from the industry that's been going on before us about how that works effectively, the media producers out there that have been doing it for such a long time. So yeah, I think what you're saying is right. I think there's lots of powerful storytelling, and whether it's how the instructor uses it. So is it about the case study approach in business or education? Well, maybe there's something powerful about the documentary there, or is it about illustrating that concept in a different way? So,
Which the content is going to be there. I mean, going back to that box of videos that was shipped to me and that I couldn't use. And they were compelling, they were memorable. That was the problem, is that they were teaching wrong stuff. And so, it's that marriage of really good, quality, solid, academic material that we could stand behind with the storytelling, the production, and then, how to present information according to multimedia principles. It's a sweet spot that's hard to get to, but I think that's really the sweet spot.
A question that I asked Michelle and Michael in kind of preparation for this was, and I'll pose it to the audience, is in thinking about the video content that does get used on your campuses, the instructional content, are your libraries purchasing collections? Are faculty doing homegrown things where they're sitting there talking and, the students are like, why do I have to keep, because the talking head, but there's no images in the videos, or are they just going out and digging deep into the internet and finding these little things that they think are interesting? Where is the content that you see being used coming from?
combination, I think, of for us brought to packages, definitely many more streaming collections that we purchase from various vendors. And then someone else touched on something that I really experience a lot, which is we get a lot of one-off requests from independent filmmakers. Film Platform is helping with that quite a bit, and I am surprised how often people in Thailand or Denmark or wherever, the Middle East, actually say, yeah, sure, and they put it up on Vimeo often now, and they pick it up from there. So the delivery platforms, I think, are getting more robust. And a lot of those we host on a media server dedicated to our university that's commercially run for us.
Right.
We did it locally, and that was so labor intensive, it was ridiculous. So now we do it the other way. And but I am surprised how often I used to think this is going to be like way too labor intensive to even look into this, and I can never predict somebody that's like in the next city might not answer me, and somebody way across the board might make it easy. So, but those are more labor intensive. The collections are the easiest way to go for discovery too, right? Because of that, you can turn somebody loose on and say, go and have a look and find content that you think, so that it's done in context, which is, I think, rather than me guessing what people might want, the faculty member can actually go and find something that's going to work for the specific learning outcome that they want.
Does anybody have departments that are going off on their own, purchasing their own collections that, with their own budget, out of their own department budget, or are they relying exclusively on the libraries to make those purchases? Anybody have departments going rogue and doing their own thing? Yeah.
Just about the we have a separate department, our ed tech department, that will work with instructors who want to do video. It's not always great,
Yeah.
but then they can put it up and
I'd be interested to know if those that asked the questions at the beginning, I know the lady at the back did, whether you feel more the wiser because of this talk, or if there's more curiosity about particular things you'd like to hear more of. Because I mean, we at Sage, well, particularly, I mean, we want to collaborate with people like Michelle and others to try and see if we can foster more learning about this, so it feeds into our own development, but to help, obviously help our partners in choices they're making.
I don't really know how to answer that question,
Yeah.
but I was thinking the whole time that you all were talking, I was trying to relate it to what we're doing. And so, for instance, we embed videos, because we have a technology department that if an instructor is trying to create a course online or transfer a course to a course online, the technology department will help them, and so they embed whole videos into their Canvas course, their content management system. Also, like Alexander Street Press, like I'm a librarian for College of the Arts, so I represent theater and dance. And I don't know if you can do this in Canopy, but with an Alexander Street Press, you can take clips and you can put clips of examples. So if you're teaching like the history of dance and you want to take clips of different dance modes, you can embed that in Canvas. And that's what I see going on in our campus.
Yeah.
But that didn't really answer your question, so.
No, it's, well, yeah, and clipping is something we offer our own platform. I think all major providers should do that. And it's putting power into the instructor and, of course, into the student, I think, isn't it?
And how much usage does that get?
Well, we've seen like a direct correlation between embedding activity and usage. So I think that's that intentionality piece that we talked about for sure.
The presentation that I'm doing next is about, we created this online teaching information literacy, and we've created videos. The blended librarian is doing it with me, and we're teaching information literacy concepts. And she believes that a video shouldn't be longer than 2 minutes for students to understand the concept of the learning objective, but then also she'll embed and create like a quiz, so that would instill what they've learned.
Yeah, from time to time I feel sort of questions about, well, how much time how long can a video be before the brain can't process it? And I'm just like, well, I can't really parse that question as a cognitive psychologist. I don't think that there is, a time that, okay, beyond this you can't pay attention. I mean, we pay attention to feature films. We can, in a sense, sustain attention over a miniseries. I mean, some narratives and ideas, they take hours and hours and hours. And a video that's not compelling and that a student is not going to have to act on, it could be 30 seconds and you're gone. So I really like that idea of like, okay, how is it functionally going to be used? And yeah, shorter is generally going to be better, but it does depend on other things. So that's really intriguing what
I think it does depend on, I think there's the difference between the two circumstances.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily believe that people won't watch a video that's over 2 minutes, but I also make videos for the YouTube channel, and the metrics show that people stopped watching after about 2 minutes. Not that I made videos that were much longer than that.
I'm glad you came. Thanks. This is the person I'm doing the presentation with, our blended librarian.
Well, I keep thinking about your original question/statement of being in the class with the faculty member who said, "Oh, you can't use those videos," and thinking back to when we shifted from from our journals being exclusively in print, and I still have students who will come say, well, my faculty member says I have to use a real journal, as if the PDF version that's online is fake.
Yep.
And so it's like, at what point, I wonder when the shift will happen, when video and film will be a more acceptable thing, because I think a lot of, the students who are in our classes now, I wonder if when they get into our positions, that, well, video, it's part of the conversation. And why would you exclude it as this special thing that isn't really, influential or doesn't have value in the academic conversation? So I just wonder when that shift will take place, because but we still encounter students who are like, I promise you it's the exact same thing. And, if I can sometimes, who is your faculty member? Maybe I can have some follow-up conversation with them. But it's still, in 2018, I still feel really sad when a student tells me that. Because I'm like, man, that's the wrong kind of conversation or framework to give a student to say it's not real.
Yeah.
So.
I know, and I agree with you, and I wish we could create a rubric of sorts that would be like video impact factors.
Yeah. No, it's true. Well, I've gotten into listening to podcasts quite a bit, and I was really excited when I was listening to a podcast that Slate put out. And at the very last episode, the person who put I think it was like a 6-part series together, directed his listeners to go see my bibliography and see what I used to do the research for this podcast, because he was, I think, reinforcing this idea that you've learned a lot from me, but go see where I got this information from, because it's not original to me. So I felt really encouraged. In fact, I thought, I should write that guy and tell him, that's good work right there.
It's so funny that you mentioned impact factor for video, because in fact we quoted it back in this white paper because another librarian mentioned it.
Oh.
I think that's the sort of the golden goose, the golden egg, whatever it is, the holy grail. For some, certainly for scholarly video, we get there. But educational video is so challenging to measure. We just talked a little bit about sort of the challenge with measuring sort of critical thinking and development of that. So indexing video and how that's indexed, I think that's sort of, that's a huge challenge. I think working towards what I'm hoping we can convey, or hopefully start to convey with this work, is that there are some good principles, some best practices, some people are coalescing towards an understanding of what is having, quotes, impact in certain contexts.
Mm-hmm.
Impact factor for video is, I should imagine, is some way off, but you're not the first person who's mentioned it to me, sure.
Well, out of respect for the people following us, we should probably wrap it up. But thank you so much for coming and for listening and for participating in this lively conversation, or lively discussion.